The Browns' decision to start Dillon Gabriel over Shedeur Sanders didn't sit well with everyone, but no one made that clearer than Myles Garrett. The veteran star didn't lash out, but his reaction was telling. During the announcement, Garrett's controlled demeanor masked a deeper frustration that longtime observers could easily read. His posture, his silence, even the absence of his usual energy spoke volumes. In a franchise already known for instability,
if you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
The benching of Sanders became a flashpoint, and Garrett's response revealed just how far that discontent had reached inside the locker room. This wasn't about favoritism or locker room politics, it was about principle. The video positions Garrett's quiet frustration as a demand for competence and clarity at the top. When leadership decisions start to clash with on-field reality, veterans notice first. Garrett's reaction wasn't just about a quarterback. It was a challenge to a front office whose choices increasingly feel disconnected from performance. And in that quiet stand, he may have forced the franchise to finally reckon with its own dysfunction. The Browns thought it would blow over. They thought naming Dillon Gabriel as the starting quarterback would pass with minimal friction, maybe stir a few headlines, spark a few social media takes, and then fade away by the next press cycle. But what they didn't account for was the silence. Not the kind that comes from fans who've given up hope, but the kind that cuts deeper. The kind that comes from inside the locker room. From Myles Garrett. The moment the announcement dropped, the atmosphere inside the team facility shifted. Nobody yelled. Nobody staged a walkout. But players noticed who stopped clapping. They noticed who stayed seated. And they definitely noticed Garrett, arms crossed, jaw locked, saying nothing at all. It was one of those moments where everything felt off. Because up until that point, all signs pointed in another direction. Shedeur Sanders had been doing the work. First to arrive, last to leave. Dialed in during walkthroughs, taking command in drills, building chemistry with the offense. He wasn't just showing promise. He was showing consistency, the kind that veterans respond to. The kind that tells everyone on the field, this guy is serious. And yet, the Browns went with Gabriel. Quietly. No grand press conference, no real explanation. Just a decision that landed like a weight in the room. And the message it sent? Performance doesn't matter as much as narrative. And leadership, no matter how subtle or steady, doesn't guarantee a fair shot. That's what set Garrett off. Not in volume, but in presence. He didn't throw a tantrum, he withdrew. When your most respected player goes quiet, it's not a coincidence. It's calculated. Garrett's body language told the truth. And the truth was this: the locker room saw a mistake being made. A strategic decision rooted in fear, not fact. And the front office didn't even blink. For a team that preaches culture, the fallout was instant. Tension crept in. Players who'd been rallying behind Sanders started going through the motions. The energy at practice dipped. Conversations became short, eye contact more rare. And all the while, Garrett remained composed, but visibly checked out. The guy who usually set the tone with effort and intensity was suddenly conserving his fire. That's not leadership fading, it's leadership making a point. Meanwhile, Sanders kept doing what professionals do. He didn't pout. He didn't let the benching define him. He kept showing up, executing, staying prepared. His teammates noticed. Garrett noticed. And with every practice rep that looked cleaner than Gabriel's, the decision looked more and more ridiculous. And yet, the Browns held firm, for a while. But the pressure didn't stay internal. Fans started questioning the choice. Analysts began comparing practice footage. The media leaned in. And Garrett's subtle signals, cryptic social posts, visible distance from coaching staff, a slow, sarcastic clap during one of the QB sessions, added fuel to the fire. It became impossible to ignore. Not because of the noise, but because of the silence behind it. That's when things started shifting. Not because the Browns suddenly had a change of heart, but because they were being outperformed by the truth. Sanders began earning more reps. Coaches, unable to keep ignoring what they were seeing, started rotating him back in. First in situational packages. Then in high-leverage moments. And every time he stepped in, the offense looked sharper. The sideline looked more engaged. The players responded. And Garrett? He started leaning back in. It wasn't immediate, but it was noticeable. A little more energy in team huddles. A little more presence on the sidelines. Not because the damage was undone, but because, finally, the correction had begun. What's wild is how close the Browns came to blowing it all up. They nearly dismantled the trust they've been trying to build for years, sabotaged by a single decision that valued appearance over reality. And it took Garrett, without saying a word, to push the organization back toward accountability. Because that's what this has always been about. This isn't a drama about two quarterbacks. It's not about favoritism or play style. It's about leadership and how it's defined. Shedeur Sanders led through work. Garrett led through principle. And together, without ever demanding attention, they exposed just how fragile Cleveland's foundation really was. The Browns have talent. They've got pieces. But they've also got a history of stepping on their own progress. And when the leadership upstairs starts overriding what's clearly working on the field, guys like Garrett are forced into roles they never asked for, culture enforcers. The shift back to Sanders didn't come from some epiphany in a film room. It came from weeks of quiet resistance. From Garrett refusing to pretend like everything was fine. From players backing a teammate who had clearly earned more than he was given. From results, undeniable, consistent results. And that's why the Browns are at a crossroads. They can take this moment and learn from it. They can acknowledge, even if privately, that performance has to be the deciding factor. That leadership from players like Garrett should never be disregarded. That culture is built in decisions like this, not slogans on a wall. Or they can repeat the cycle. Because if there's one thing Garrett's made clear, it's that his patience has limits. And if the organization continues to undermine the players actually trying to build something real, his protest won't stay silent forever. And next time? It won't be a slow clap. It'll be something you can't walk back. For now, Sanders is getting the opportunity he earned. The team looks like it's finding its rhythm again. And Garrett, the anchor in all of this, is re-engaging. But the warning remains, don't let it happen again. Because that fracture, once reopened, won't heal the same way. The Browns have a second chance here. Not just to get the quarterback situation right, but to prove to their players that they're paying attention. That merit still means something. That leadership, real leadership, isn't just a title, it's action. So if Cleveland wants to build something lasting, they'll keep trusting the guys who've already proven their worth. They'll keep listening to the Garretts of the world. And they'll stop making decisions that insult the intelligence of everyone inside that locker room. Because the message was sent, loud and clear, even in silence. Now it's time to see if anyone up top was actually listening. So, what do you think? Did Garrett's quiet rebellion save the Browns from themselves? Is Sanders the future of this offense? Or are we just one misstep away from another spiral? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Because in the NFL, the chaos never really ends, it just finds a new headline. And we'll be here to break down every move, every mistake, and every moment the league tries to pretend didn't happen. What makes this situation so hard to look away from isn't just the quarterback controversy. It's not just Garrett's quiet rebellion or the internal tension it exposed. It's that the Cleveland Browns, once again, found a way to turn something simple into something self-destructive. And it all started with a decision that told everyone paying attention, we still don't know how to get out of our own way. Because if the Browns were operating like a healthy franchise, this wouldn't be a story. Shedeur Sanders had earned the job. Period. His preparation was elite. His focus, unshakable. His presence in practice? Loud enough without needing to say a word. This was a guy who had the locker room. And not in a superficial, Instagram followers kind of way. The vets respected him. The staff acknowledged his progress. The younger guys followed his lead. He wasn't just developing into a quarterback, he was stepping into a leadership role organically. But instead of building on that momentum, the Browns yanked the rug. They named Gabriel the starter. And in doing so, they didn't just bench Sanders. They benched the culture they claimed they were building. This wasn't a performance-based move. That much was clear. Gabriel wasn't the sharper quarterback in practice. He wasn't winning the locker room. He wasn't setting the tone. But he was the safer choice. The quieter headline. The more comfortable answer to a question that didn't need to be asked. And Garrett? He saw right through it. Because when you've been with a franchise long enough, you learn to spot the patterns. And this one was all too familiar. The Browns, once again, were opting for control over growth. Headlines over results. They weren't making a decision based on what they'd seen on the field. They were trying to manage optics. And that's where Garrett drew the line. He didn't say it out loud. He didn't have to. His silence did the work for him. You could feel it. The shift in tone. The way he started pulling back. The absence of that usual fire in walkthroughs. The way he stared through press conferences with a blank, unreadable look. The man who always set the tone had stopped playing along. That's the part the front office missed. They underestimated what a silent Garrett meant. They thought his professionalism would outweigh his principles. But Garrett didn't get to where he is by keeping quiet when the culture slips. He spent years trying to hold the line, trying to push the franchise to stop making the same mistakes over and over again. And this one? This was a step too far. And it wasn't just Garrett. The locker room felt it. The energy changed. Players got quieter. The tension crept into meetings. Guys stopped buying in, not out of rebellion, but because they felt like the people making the decisions weren't seeing the same things they were seeing every single day. That's how you lose a team. Not with one bad call, but with a decision that breaks trust. And Gabriel? He was never set up for success. Not because he didn't have ability, but because he walked into a job that everyone knew belonged to someone else. That's not a knock on him, it's just reality. When a locker room doesn't believe in the guy under center, there's only so much you can do. Meanwhile, Sanders just kept showing up. He stayed composed. Kept practicing like the QB1 he wasn't officially listed as. Stayed consistent. Stayed professional. And that, in itself, became the most powerful argument in his favor. Because while the staff tried to control the narrative, Sanders just kept letting the work speak for itself. And slowly, the tide began to turn. It didn't happen overnight. But the staff couldn't deny what they were seeing. Gabriel was fine, but fine wasn't enough. Not when the guy behind him was outworking him, outplaying him, and still carrying himself with the maturity of a seasoned pro. The shift started with small things. A few extra reps in team drills. A little more input in the quarterback room. Quiet adjustments. But everyone saw it for what it was. The coaches walking back a mistake without admitting they'd made one. And Garrett? He didn't gloat. He didn't spike the ball. He just started leaning back in. You could feel his energy shift, just a little. His body language got looser. He started holding guys more accountable again. Because for him, this was never about ego. It was about integrity. When Sanders started getting more reps, the locker room started to stabilize. The energy returned. Players felt like they were being heard again. That things were course-correcting. And Garrett, by simply refusing to fake his way through it, had led that change without ever saying a word. That's what makes this moment so pivotal. Because it's not just a win for Sanders. It's a test for the organization. Will they keep leaning into what they're seeing on the field? Or will they default back to the decision-making patterns that got them into this mess in the first place? Because the truth is, this entire situation is a symptom of something deeper. This is about a franchise that still hasn't learned how to get out of its own way. That still struggles to empower its leaders. That still looks at talent and sees risk instead of opportunity. And unless something fundamentally changes, it won't matter who's under center. Because when players stop trusting the people in charge, it doesn't just cost games. It costs the culture. And culture? That's the difference between being a team that competes and a team that folds the second things go sideways. Right now, Sanders is rising. Garrett is re-engaged. The team feels more unified than it has in weeks. But it's fragile. Because nothing about this has been fixed, it's just been momentarily realigned. The next decision will tell us everything. If Sanders keeps starting based on performance, if Garrett keeps seeing his leadership mirrored in the decisions being made, if the front office finally listens instead of managing narratives, the Browns might actually be on the verge of something. But if they backslide? If the next decision smells like politics or PR, if Sanders gets yanked after one off week, if Garrett's example gets ignored again, the fallout will be worse. Because this time, the players won't wait around. They've seen what accountability should look like. They've seen what it doesn't. And there won't be another round of patient silence. What's crazy is how close the Browns were to losing all of it. How one decision almost broke the trust of their most important leader. How it took a silent stand from Garrett and an unshakable response from Sanders to steer it all back on course. Now the question is, was that enough? Did the front office get the message? Did the coaching staff learn from the mistake? Or are we still on a cycle where leadership only happens when the players force it? There's something about Cleveland. Something that always feels on the edge. Every time the franchise takes a step forward, it seems like someone at the top panics, flinches, or decides to rewrite the script. And that's how you get situations like this, where a team finally stumbles upon a quarterback with real poise, real maturity, and real locker room presence, and still decides to sit him for optics. That's how you get Shedeur Sanders benched for Dylan Gabriel. And that's how you get Myles Garrett silently declaring, "Enough." This wasn't just another quarterback rotation. This was a credibility crisis. It exposed everything the players already feared. That it doesn't matter how hard you work. That even if you're first in, last out, earning every inch in practice, there's still a chance someone upstairs decides your story isn't marketable enough, or that someone else fits a pre-made narrative better. That's the weight of what Garrett was responding to. It's not that Gabriel was a disaster. He was serviceable. But that's the problem. Safe doesn't spark belief. Safe doesn't command huddles. Safe doesn't fix the kind of culture Cleveland has been trying to fix for years. Accountability, integrity, earned opportunity. Everything Shedeur Sanders brought to the table and was still overlooked for. And Garrett saw that. A veteran with nothing left to prove, choosing to prove a point anyway. Not through interviews or statements, but through presence. Through withdrawal. Through that calculated, slow-clap sarcasm during film sessions. Through the glances he didn't give, the nods he reserved, the body language that said it all. This isn't right. The locker room felt it immediately. When a leader like Garrett checks out, even slightly, it changes the air. And it wasn't just him. Other veterans started pulling back. Players stopped echoing coach speak in pressers. They got shorter, colder. And not because they were angry at Gabriel, but because they were angry at what the decision represented. They were tired of being gaslit. The coaching staff could say all the right things, that competition was close, that both quarterbacks were developing, but the players saw what actually happened on the field. They knew who moved the offense. They knew who studied harder, communicated clearer, earned trust faster. It wasn't a secret. And yet, the decision didn't reflect any of that. So Sanders sat. And the team stalled. Meanwhile, social media did what it does, amplified every moment, every whisper, every cryptic post from Garrett. The fan base started asking questions the front office didn't want to answer. Clips from practice surfaced. Analysts started showing side-by-side comparisons. You could only hide from it for so long. Because nothing spreads faster than truth that was ignored. And through it all, Sanders stayed locked in. That was the most damning part for the coaching staff. He never gave them a reason to justify their choice. No outbursts. No interviews with coded jabs. He just kept doing what he'd always done, his job. Each practice rep was a quiet rebellion. Every clean read, every controlled scramble, every small moment of leadership Sanders showed when he wasn't supposed to be the leader. That's what moved the needle. And the team moved with him. Guys started walking with him off the field. He got more dap from vets. More looks during team periods. Garrett even started standing behind him during red zone reps. Not loudly, not performatively, just present. When your captain shadows your backup quarterback during drills. That's not subtle. The staff noticed. They'd have to be blind not to. And eventually, the pivot started. It began like all backtracks do, quietly. A few more plays here. A few more snaps there. A post-practice note about re-evaluating packages. No one came out and admitted anything, but the change was happening. The team wasn't waiting for permission anymore. They were responding to what they already knew. And here's the thing. This whole saga could have been avoided. If the Browns had simply trusted what was in front of them, trusted the players, the process, the culture they claimed to be building, none of this would have happened. There would have been no locker room split, no tension between vets and staff, no viral speculation over Garrett's body language. Instead, they made a decision rooted in fear. Fear of change. Fear of narrative backlash. Fear of investing in a young quarterback who didn't check the right media boxes. And it almost cost them everything. Because make no mistake, if the situation had dragged on, if Sanders hadn't quietly forced their hand, if Garrett had stayed disengaged a moment longer, this team would have imploded. You can't operate without belief. You can't lead players who no longer think leadership is real. Now, they've bought themselves another chance. Sanders is seeing the field again. The locker room is stabilizing. Garrett is locked back in. But it's fragile, because belief, once cracked, takes a long time to rebuild. And the next mistake won't be forgiven as quietly. This wasn't just a quarterback controversy. It was a referendum on how the Browns operate. For once, they had the right people in the building. A veteran leader who holds everyone accountable, and a young quarterback who meets that standard without blinking. And still, they almost blew it. The players fixed it. Not the executives. Not the press team. The players. And that's why this story matters. Because it shows exactly how thin the line is between potential and collapse. And how, even in a league dominated by billion-dollar decisions and big-name branding, the smallest moments, like a nod from Myles Garrett, can say more than any press release ever will. Cleveland has been here before. Teetering on the edge of something promising, only to step back into dysfunction. But now they have an opportunity to break the cycle. If they keep trusting Sanders. If they stop ignoring Garrett. If they learn to value performance over presentation. Because the difference between a franchise turnaround and another rebuild isn't about talent. It's about whether leadership chooses truth, even when it's inconvenient. Especially when it's inconvenient. And the truth was always there. It was in Sanders' early mornings and quiet huddles. It was in Garrett's silence. It was in every rep, every sideline glance, every meeting where players nodded at each other but not at the message being delivered. That's what real leadership looks like. It's not always loud. Sometimes it's just unwavering. And now, the Browns are either going to lean into that or lose it. So what do you think? Have they finally figured it out? Will the Browns stop undermining their own locker room? Or is this just another calm before another self-inflicted storm? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you've been following this saga with the same side eye we have, hit subscribe. Because whether they get it right or blow it up again, we'll be right here, watching every moment, every decision, and every silence that speaks louder than words.